Your plants may be ready to go in the ground, but is your ground ready for your plants? A lot of gardeners don't realize that transplant shock occurs largely because of a lack of microbial support in the soil receiving the plant. Of course, temperature changes and root disturbances are big factors too, but what if I told you that there was a way that you could significantly mitigate those factors and give your plants the best possible chance to start growing better, faster, all for the cost of a potato? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how and why you need to start making this microbe solution today to maximize your plant's chance for success in the ground. And if all of that sounds too good to be true, welcome back to the channel. My name is Taylor, and I am pretty committed at this point to finding creative solutions to costly garden mistakes, and while not breaking the bank and improving soil health in the process. And I want to make this accessible for you. So if you want to get the recipe printout for this microbial solution, we put a link in the description that you can hit to get it. As you'll see, this stuff relies on pretty specific timing. So we've got a place on there that you can track your brew, track the ambient temperatures, the timing, all of that, so that you can get started dialing this stuff in. You're going to want to use this as a way to warm up the microbial communities in your soil before planting. But if you've already slapped some plants in the ground, it's not too late to practice the JMS application, especially if you notice that your plants are struggling to establish. This might do the trick in getting them to kind of kick into gear. And so before we get any further, let's just talk about what this microbial solution is in the first place. This is a recipe that comes from a book called JADAM Organic Farming by Young-Sung Cho, a Korean farmer who developed some techniques in the vein of his father, Han Kyu Cho, the father of Korean natural farming. And in his book, Cho describes the process that we can observe in nature of nutrient cycling and microbial diversity. In simple terms, we're borrowing complexity and diversity from nature and we're introducing it into our gardenings. Now, if you're familiar with IMO from Korean natural farming, this will make sense. IMO is something that we recommend for long-term soil microbe stability, but JADAM Microbial Solution, or JMS, is a way to give your plants a short-term burst of beneficial microbes. These microbes are extremely effective in breaking down organic matter and locked up minerals into plant available nutrients. They also provide a rich protective layer against pathogens and harmful bacteria, mold, and fungi. And if all of that sounds incredible, stay tuned, because I'm gonna show you exactly how we make this stuff week after week without buying complex ingredients from the store. To make the JADAM microbial solution, you gotta get your hands on some legit leaf mold soil. This isn't leaf litter. It's the soil beneath the leaf litter, although getting some of the decomposed wood particles and leaves won't hurt. And there are a couple of ways that you can obtain said soil. The first and easiest way would be to just go digging under your compost pile, or under where you've left some leaves or a pile of grass sitting for some months. That soil is going to be housing some great microbes that would love to take a bite out of some mashed potatoes. But if you don't have access to this kind of soil at the moment, you can also go into the forest, which is really where you're going to find the best stuff anyway. You want to look at a deciduous forest. Conifers drop needles, which are often antimicrobial, and we're going for pro-microbial here. So visit the forest nearby, snag some soil. If you can, go to an area that is a little bit higher in elevation from your growing space, because it's going to have microbes that are going to be a little bit more robust, and the forest is less likely to be disturbed. In his book, Cho talks about collecting soil from the mountains. Once you're there, you might as well grab a gallon or two of it, depending on how much land you're working with. A gallon is probably going to do the trick for most home gardeners for an entire season. You don't need that much. Now, if you've got your leaf mold soil, we're ready to get our other ingredients together, namely the potato that I mentioned earlier. This is going to serve as the food source for the microbes in the soil. The next ingredient is salt. Not just any old salt. Don't be throwing iodized stuff anywhere but the garbage. That stuff is toxic. I'm talking about sea salt, unrefined if possible. I like using Redmond's real salt because it contains a large swath of trace minerals. But basically what the salt is going to do in the mixture is it's going to encourage certain microbes to grow while keeping the other weaker or pathogenic microbes from developing. Salt selects out unhelpful microbes, and you only need a little bit for a 5-gallon batch of JMS. Finally, you need your water. And this might be obvious, but I'll say it anyway. Make sure you're using dechlorinated water. If you don't have a filter, fill up your bucket 24 to 48 hours in advance and let it off-gas the chlorine. There are a few supplies that you need for making JMS. The first being a bucket or a barrel that you actually make the brew in. We most often just use a 5-gallon bucket. You also need a paint strainer or a thin kitchen towel or a piece of cheesecloth that you can use to strain the potato and the soil through. And once you've got those things and your 4 ingredients, you're ready to make the solution. Fill up your 5-gallon bucket with your unchlorinated water. Toss in a large pinch of salt, 20 grams for a 5-gallon bucket should do the trick. then place the potato and the soil into the paint strainer and work it all the way through into the water. The water will start getting cloudy very quickly with the potato starch and the soil particles, and the reason that we're straining it at this point is so that none of the particles clog up our watering can later on. Once it's been well incorporated into the water, you can use a rock to weigh down the paint strainer, and then either tie it to the side of the bucket where the handle is, or put a stick over the top of the bucket and tie it to that. You can also just remove the bag altogether, but I feel like it works best leaving the bag in the water for more microbes to actually release. At this point, you're ready to just wait and let the batch do its thing. If it's colder outside, like below 60 degrees during the day, I would recommend making this indoors where the temperature is more steady. Between 70 and 90 degrees is a good range. Warmer temperatures will speed up the process. You want to check the bucket every 6 to 12 hours, or 8 to 12 hours if it's overnight. Now what you're looking for here is bubbles and foam. This is what mine looked like after 12 hours. There's almost no signs of microbial development, but here it is after another 24 hours. You can start to see a few small bubbles forming in the upper levels of the water. And then here it is again just a few hours later, and you can see that bubbles have suddenly begun to form. And then here we can see that the foam is getting quite active. The temperature that we're brewing this in is a consistent 70 degrees. This is our functioning greenhouse. We've got a space heater and a fan. If you want to keep your bucket warmer and speed up the process even more, you could use a heat mat. You'll want to make sure to monitor the temperature of the water to make sure it's not getting too hot, much above 95 degrees, and you're potentially getting too hot. 70 to 90 degrees is a great range to shoot for. Once your brew has reached peak foam like this, it's ready to water into the ground because it means that the microbes have peaked in activity. The foam will form a disc that is kind of slightly detached from the sides of the bucket. If you wait longer, the foam disc on top will start breaking apart and dissolving, and this indicates that the batch has over-fermented. You can still use it, but it'll just be a little bit less effective. If all the bubbles are gone, it might mean that all the microbes are gone, and you'll just want to discard the batch without expecting anything to come from it. Now, when you're applying this as a soil drench, to get the plants ready to go in the ground, you can apply it undiluted. But it's still good to water it in to get the microbes fully incorporated into the soil. Of course, ideally this water is dechlorinated. So time your watering with rainy periods as best as you can, or water it in via irrigation. We use this water filter to get the chlorine out. Highly recommend getting a water filter in general so that you can maximize the microbial life in your soil season to season. If you are watering this on fresh transplants, you want to be much more careful and dilute it 1 to 100 in water. You don't want to risk oversaturating the baby plant root systems with microbes because you could cause a feeding frenzy and the roots could die off. For more established plants and trees, bushes, and shrubs, you can apply the microbial solution diluted 1 to 10 and likely be safe. But always do a test, especially as you're first getting started. One more consideration that you might make is that if you have any homemade JADAM liquid fertilizers, you could mix those in with your microbial solution to maximize the effect of this soil drench. The fertilizers, especially if they're older, are going to contain tons of plant available nutrients to your soil. So by adding it in, you're adding nutrients and the microbes that will deliver them to the plant roots. Make sure to dilute your fertilizer 1 to 1,000 in water for baby plants, and maybe even 1 to 2,000 parts water to be safe. A little goes a long way. This process is more about training your plants to not need immediate nutrient access from the soil. You're teaching them to collaborate with the soil microbes. As far as what you can expect from regular JMS application, overall, your soil tilth and soil structure is going to improve, meaning that over time, but still fairly rapidly, the pockets of organic matter in the soil will be consumed by microbes, leaving natural aeration through the soil. This will allow plant roots to travel downward with greater ease, also making their exudates available to microbes, and the cycle continues. Overall, this leads to an improved habitat for soil microbes and a generally broader spectrum of microbes and nutrients for your plants. And it's not just the soil that gets the benefit. When you apply this microbial solution to your plants, foliarly, the leaves and stems develop colonies of beneficial bacteria that fend off pathogens. The best way to apply this foliarly is to combine it with a clean wetting agent, which you can check out our video on how to make. Often this wetting agent is paired with a natural pesticide because it helps the substance cling to and spread out across the plant foliage. But the microbial solution is an amazing addition to this spray. Now for a long-term approach, creating microbial communities that sustain season to season, you'll want to check out our video on IMO, indigenous microorganisms, and how those can be cultivated for robust and specialized microbes that will inhabit undisturbed soil indefinitely. However, IMO is time consuming to make and it requires a lot of trial and error. In the meantime, and even if you are using IMO already, I strongly recommend trying out this microbial solution for a quick result in your soil and for highly effective transplants. Another reminder to check out our Microbial Solution recipe cheat sheet linked in the description. And if you're interested in learning more about the natural fertilizers that you can make that accompany this microbial solution, you definitely want to check out our mini course deep dive into the process of culturing these incredible DIY liquid fertilizers. Thanks for watching this, and we'll see you in the next video.